So this is what the database looks like, and we'll start with our first test question, and then we'll dive right in. For each, we're getting ideas too of what other topics to do.
Wow.
For each topic, oh yeah, look, people are definitely getting in here now. For each topic, there will be a brief discussion. We'll let someone take a side. So for example, let's just start with green versus blue. I clearly am going to go with blue. And I would like to debate someone why the color blue is better than the color green. Who wants to take the side of green?
I'll take green.
But we can have multiple people taking the argument, right? We can have.
I've already beat you and I've taken green. It's right behind me.
Yeah, right behind you. But see, I mean, look how much better I look in blue than you look with green behind you. And so with that one, we're just going to let people vote on whether they think green or blue is better. I'm going to vote
What
blue.
kind of environment is that? What are you sitting in, a junk pile?
My vote was cast. So you click on either green or blue on the match list, and then your votes should be counted in FileMaker real time, which is, you know, whatever kind of a delay there is with that. So 5 more people just joined. For the people just coming in, there's a link in chat that you need to open up a database. And the database is how you vote on topics. So we've just opened up topic green versus blue, and blue is winning hands down right now, 7-2. So please cast your vote. Let's see. I'll put the link again in chat. And then we'll get on to the first real topic. But before we do that, I just want to say hi to everyone. We've got 53 people on board now, which I think, Eric, is this bigger than you've ever had in an audience before?
I mean, I'd have to go check now.
We're thinking this could be the largest FileMaker meetup ever, so that's definitely fun. We did that by merging several groups together and coming up with a topic that's sort of a game show format. And it's lovely to see people from all over the country, really all over the world. So open up the database. To open up the database, it should have an auto enter password. But people are saying they can't get in. Did somebody change the auto enter?
No.
I might have to go look at the server.
Oh.
Move it along. Let's get to the
Yeah.
first topic.
Let's get to the first topic. So I'll work on the server while we're doing that. The first topic is button versus button bar. And we've got sound effects. Is that you, Matt, playing sound effects?
No.
Oh, I'm hearing strange sounds and don't know why.
Because everybody on this call has a computer.
Oh, that might be it.
Oh. They could either default mute everybody or something.
So button versus button bar, we need a champion for button. Who likes buttons instead of button bars?
I like button bars.
Dave, you like button bars? Dave Wheelock is going to take the position for button.
No, I'm not. I'm shaking my head no.
No, you have to be able to take a position fine. Scott Howard is taking. Scott is defending buttons and saying why buttons are better than button bars.
Ooh.
Right, Scott Howard? You're on mute. You can't defend your topic if you're on mute.
Button bars all the way.
No, you're on buttons. Someone has to take the other position.
I'll take buttons.
Oh, you're signing me one.
Robert,
signing you one.
Matt, I'll take buttons.
Robert, no.
Robert, you want to take buttons? Fine, because Scott doesn't want it.
Thank you, Robert.
Oh, we better start with buttons then.
How are we arguing these points?
So, Robert, why are buttons better?
Well, buttons are better because they let you define an outer shadow. I mean, the button bar also lets you define the outer shadow, but it applies to the whole button bar. So if you want to use it for a state, the button is really the only object that lets you do that. And some people will argue that you can't calculate the label that you're going to use on the button, but you can use a merge expression. So to me, that's I can be close enough or a lifesaver in times, but you indeed cannot write up a full-fledged calculation and use that as the button label. So I have to concede for that.
Okay, interesting. And who thinks who is the champion for button bars? Everybody?
Everybody else.
Dave Wheelock, I'm going to make you do it.
All right. Okay. Well, with button bars, obviously the calculation for the label is the key driver. Plus, also you can it can have an active state.
I didn't even know you couldn't do a calculation for the button. Of course, I never hardly use it, so I wouldn't know, I guess.
Yeah, the active state's a pretty big thing for sure.
Yes, but it's a pain when you have to set it for all the different states.
True. Now, can I argue against a button bar? Because there is one.
You can. We need more votes, though. By the way, blue handily won the first round, so button bars are currently winning 14-3. Robert, your argument was insufficient.
I guess I have to vote for my own side at least.
Well, you did have
now
to.
it's 4.
you got some votes. Yeah, everybody should vote. All right. Anybody who else has anything good to say about buttons or button bars?
With button bars, when you set a conditional format, it applies to all buttons unless you set the condition to true, at which point it overrides all the state conditions for the button segment. So there's some pros and cons mixed in that one.
Yeah, that's true.
Button states are definitely a hindrance when you're trying to use button bars as a regular button.
That's true. Like if one of them gets selected, then all of them in that button bar are selected, and it's very confusing. You have to really manage that in the theme.
So here's something everybody can do to participate. I want you to think about what's the percentage of time that you use in current development button bars versus buttons, and put in the chat, put like button bars 60%, buttons 40%, and that'll give something for everybody to participate and everybody to look at. So throw it in the chat, select the to everyone, and then we'll see what people are currently doing. Everybody likes to be involved. 50-50.
Yeah.
95% bars, 100% button bars.
Buttons for quick and dirty. I mean, if it's just quick and dirty, I only need one button to do one thing. I'll just use
Exactly.
Wrong. That's incorrect.
But
button bars, if you only ever use button bars and never use buttons, then your themes can be made simpler. You can delete all of the button themes and have only button bar themes. And so what I do all day is I make a button bar and I delete 2 of the widgets if I want a single button. And the other thing that I really like about it,
and
even
the
though
same
I'm not
can be
supposed to
said about just using buttons.
Yeah.
Delete all your teams for button bars.
I'm using a lot of buttons just because of the states. It's such a hassle.
Yeah.
Well, I end up using button bars for labels often because I can add an icon to it. I can add states to it. I can get even spacing, consistent formatting, all in one shot. Just bang, they're done.
And the resizing on button bars can be both nice and not so nice. I mean, sometimes you want to hide a segment, and then your stuff will resize, and maybe you like it, or maybe it just looks not so good because you didn't anticipate that it would have fewer elements. So things to watch for.
You can get around with that by taking and putting in a reverse state button that has an icon that's transparent and get to the same point. Just that way the size stays the same. It is a pain in the butt. I wish they'd set it up so you could define either size or shrink. Yeah.
Yes, if you don't have separators, that is right. But if you have separators in between your segments, the separator is going to show.
Wait, Robert, are you arguing for or against button bars now?
Well, I thought that Kirk was pointing to something that's great about button bars, because you can fake an absent segment, and I was just pointing out that the technique relies on not having separators between segments.
So interleave the dummy ones so that you don't have that problem.
On the UI aspect, I like the button. You can even use it for title, and if you need to add an icon to a title, it's pretty easy, even if you don't do any programming with it. And if you need to turn it into a button, it's already a button.
But button bars and buttons both have that same. Is there any difference in the icon control for button bars and buttons? I thought they were the same in that one way.
Oh yeah, but I mean, using a button for a title, even or a subtitle, if you don't need to use text, you can use a button.
I do that all the time. My biggest feature of a button bar is to actually, like a one segment button bar is as a layout calculation object.
Ah.
Is there any downside to doing that? I do that all the time as well, but is there a downside?
Number formatting is annoying.
Yeah.
That's one.
You can get away with a custom function.
Yeah.
Do that.
And sorry for the button camp also.
Then you have a lot of CSS wrappers around that, or extra CSS wrappers. It's inconsequential for the most part, but if you had a whole screen of them, then
I was going to say it's also easier to switch a segment into a popover button than it is to switch a button into a popover button.
Sure.
So.
Well, there is no switch. It's a new button popover, right?
Yes.
The only times I can think of using a button recently was there's like field labels for like a list view, and somebody's like, oh, you know, it'd be cool if we could click on that and sort it, you know, and then changing that into a single step sort, done as a button, right? Rather than deleting it and adding a button bar and managing all that.
So how many people would switch back to buttons if we all petitioned and FileMaker all of a sudden made it so that buttons could use calculations just like button bars? Then you alleviate the need to set extra states which don't apply to an actual button. Like
I'd be more likely to use buttons then.
Yeah.
I fairly frequently use the ability to go back and forth between popover and, you know, script triggering button when I can't make up my mind, or when development is you know, ongoing, in progress, and things are evolving.
Yeah, the other downside of button bars is you can't individually format segments, right? So you can't change the color of a segment or have icons on some and not on others, that sort of thing.
Well, you can. If you set the conditional format to true, you can set the colors whatever you want, and you can also set the icon transparent in that same conditional format, so you can get rid of the icons and the odd. So there is a way to do it. It's kind of kludgy.
You can also use conditional visibility on certain segments. So like a 2-segment button bar, you can have as a binary switch.
Yeah.
You can have a opposing conditional visibility statement and have 2 different buttons show up in the exact same space with one widget, which is great. I think we've let's finish this topic and move on to the next one. So we've got 28 votes for button bars and 10 for buttons.
I see.
I had a question for you, Matt, in the matches. I'm not seeing tab controls versus slide controls. So just
hey, that's a good idea.
Maybe tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, yeah. I'll add that one to the database.
You're going to be lucky if you get through all of what you have right now.
Yeah.
Well, unless I cut you guys off earlier. Which position would you take on that one, Robert?
I'm going to give you slide on the sliders.
You like sliders?
I like sliders.
All right.
Tomorrow. You going to be there tomorrow?
I prefer a full-size hamburger myself. They're kind of small.
So this meeting is going to repeat tomorrow with different topics, by the way, with the same database format at a different time at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern. So let's go on to the next one, which is global variables versus global fields. Mainly what I'm thinking about this one is in scripting. So for security, for ease of use, for ease of making an error, obviously like a one character, you can make a typo. Who wants to take the position that global variables are better?
I think it's purpose dependent, isn't it?
Yeah. Can we put it depends?
Yeah, but this is an overall thing. I'm going to put Alan and Poole in charge of that one. Alan, what do you think about that?
Global variables?
Yeah, your global variables.
I'll take it, sure.
Okay. Let's see. I'll put your name on it. And who wants to take the other position?
I'd be happy to, but that'd be 2 in a row.
Oh wait, I had already had Eric Matthews on that one, haven't I?
No, I'm on global variables. That's the side I'd pick.
All right.
I can do global fields for devil's advocate.
Present your cases.
Otherwise, Matt will have to do it.
Well, I'll start by saying that in a active development on a live system with multiple users, not having to edit schema when you need to create a new cubbyhole in memory to store things.
Oh yeah.
Nice. So that argues for global variables. Also, you can get into a record lock conflict with a global field with multiple users trying to edit it or use, edit related records that are related to keys stored in a global field. So we sidestep that entirely because global variables can't be used in relationships, but at least there's no record lock or multi-user conflict with global variables. And I'll stop there for the moment.
That's solid.
I agree with all that, and I think the one point that you did mention is sort of one of the two critical ones, in that global fields can drive relationships and global variables just can't. Global fields also are reachable between files if you have a multi-file solution. So if I'm in file A and jump over to file B, I don't have to do a parameter pass to get my global variable content over to the second file. So
that's solid.
It has its utility.
Hey, Tom Fitch, tell us how you feel about having several hundred global variables in a solution. This was a setup question right here.
This is how I feel.
When you have he and I work on a solution and there's a bunch of developers and all the developers scope, they're differently named global variables. And so when you go to the data viewer, you see 100 of them and they're not consistent and you can't find yours. And that's definitely a downside for the data viewer aspect of it. Do we have enough information to vote, or what are the cases are we going to make on this one?
I have two more other things as far as
bring it on.
Global fields. Number one, you can, if you're trying to debug something for a client or something like that, you can write a script that grabs all the variables, all the values for the global variable or global fields, where you can't script that in global variables. And sometimes, especially if you're driving relationships with them, it's nice to see what's set in those global fields for a client. Number two, I believe something set in a global field triggers a visibility calc or conditional formatting calc to refresh automatically, whereas it's in a variable, you have to explicitly refresh the object.
That's a solid point, 2 solid points. Yeah. I'll throw one other one out there. There's no security layer for global variables. And so if you're using the data in either a global variable or a global field as part of the security of your solution, like to grant or deny a feature to a user, you can't lock it down with a global variable. So if any user anywhere in the system can do a let function that they can define what it is, they can read and change the value with no security consequences of a global variable. That's pretty obscure, but it's a possible hack for security.
Yeah, I thought Chris had mentioned that, but maybe I missed it. So
I was looking at some server stats, so it's very possible I did miss that. So
what about container fields?
Container fields
and globals, global variables, and whatnot.
I hadn't even thought of that.
You can throw a binary in a global variable.
Yeah.
One other thing I'll throw out about global variables is that you can use abstraction in a let expression to instantiate dynamically named global variables and or clean them up later afterward. So you can feed data into a let expression and instantiate 1 or 5 or 1,000 global variables that are named based on context.
Similar to that, you can use repetitions in global variables to an extent you can't in global fields. You can have repetitions in global fields, but they're limited and you predefine them. Global variables, you can have
Do it on the fly.
a million repetitions, or you can use, you can code a repetition, so you can grab random string and make them into the repetition itself.
I wrote a custom function that, excuse me,
Sorry.
I wrote a custom function that will not only instantiate global variables, but it will create them in a stack, so you can actually have them documented inside of one other global variable that has a stack of all the variables. And with one other custom function, I can delete all of those global variables quickly. So there is documentation available to be created, but I don't see it widely used.
Yeah. Also on the global field side of things, if there are some people who are really avid of consistency, well, FileMaker will correct for the correct casing, regardless of how you type it. And you also get autocomplete, which you cannot get for variables.
Nice.
Yeah, sure.
You know, one thing is that global variables are not typecasted. So sometimes you have to coerce whether something's number, text, or date.
Let's vote. I'm casting my vote. And I'm not really sure which way I'm going to go because I really like them both.
Need to have a neutral vote option because I use them both extensively.
Yeah.
It's really conditional on what you're doing.
Well, how about doing like,
voting doesn't work that way.
well, whichever one you're most likely to take. You're not like not knowing what you're going to do necessarily. Just
Can I vote present, Matt? Does that count like they do in the Senate? Just vote present.
Sure. Yeah, we're not gonna get into politics, even though we are voting about things that actually affect our living.
Matt, I can't
they
tell.
make America global again?
Matt, is it letting me change my vote, or is it letting me vote twice on both
Lets you
sides?
change your vote. If you change to the other side, it goes to the voting record and modifies the existing one that you set. This is a sort of transactional little file we threw together. So I started a little database structure, and my layout was ugly, and Eric Matthews built this beautiful front end with the crazy chicken man.
And I clicked on this from Montreal, and on the topic of global variables, I ended up seeing something on screen that had $$ something.
Oh, that's funny.
I don't know if it's from the topic that it was taken or if it's actually using.
Oh, the topic name is $global _ variables. We wanted to put them in there so we knew exactly what we're talking about.
Nice.
Let's move on to the next one. This is perform find versus go to related record. This is specifically in a script.
You about that scanner? Yeah. Very good.
What was that, Andy? I'll go on.
Well, I do logistics software, and I've got many customers obviously in the space, right? So I was out.
Whoa.
We have a current process where they've got packages that go into a heat shrink tunnel, and before they do that, they hand scan each one of the boxes, and it's just an error-prone process on their part of doing it because sometimes it misscans or whatever. So my suggestion to them was, hey, why don't we just put a fixed scanner at the end of the heat shrink tunnel, right? Because the boxes are going to come out consistently on.
This could go on for a while.
In the exact same format, or aligned correctly, right?
I think Andy's on a call.
He's on a sales call.
Barcodes are up and everything's all cool.
I think
so I'm like, let's put a fixed scanner at the end.
Unmute.
Now you're muted, Matt.
There we go.
Everybody got muted.
Yeah, I muted
that is
everybody.
not what I intended. Oh, you did. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay, next topic, perform find versus go to related record. So when you're building a script and you want to get to a found set of records by whatever means, which is the better way to do it? That's the topic here. Jerry, Robin, are you on this call? I think maybe he's going to come on tomorrow. He chose a side on that one in advance. Who wants to pick the perform find, the clearly superior perform find method?
Oh, yeah, I'm all in on that.
All right. And Alan, looks like you wanted that one too, huh? Well, David, you already had one. Actually, both of you guys
Yeah.
already had a topic.
Yeah.
That's all right. David, I'll give you this one again.
Okay. Last one. Yeah.
Who wants the go to
I've
related
been
record?
burned too many times by go to related record.
Oh, have you been? Who wants go to related record, even though it's clearly superior? Not Lee. I'm going to pick someone. Fine, I'll take it.
David John George seems like he's ready.
David, you want it?
I'll take
Sweet, yours. It's Dave versus Dave.
There is one reason why go to related record is superior, and that is matching found set. The scripting requirements to gather to use a perform find when you've got a collection of 50 records and you want to match all of the children from all of that 50. It's annoying. It's a one step go to related record and you match them all and you're done.
That is a huge feature, but you missed another one too, which is the one single script step also has the ability to open up a layout, open up a new window. It has that's a powerful script step.
That is with great power comes great responsibility.
And also,
yeah.
when you do everything in one script step and you want to error trap on that,
It makes that much more difficult.
Yeah.
What failed? Was it the layout? Was it the found set?
Right.
Was
I've heard of error trapping. What is that? That was a joke. Dave Wheelock, rebut.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It makes error trapping so much more simple. I can't get over the argument for the found set. From found set to found set. That's pretty strong.
That's strong. In that case, you would use that feature.
In that one case, yeah.
How have you been burned by go to related record?
Well, it's been a while since I've actually used it, and I'd have to say it came up with no records, even though there were records to be found. But I can't remember the conditions.
I know.
And,
usually it's because they changed. It used to be, does everyone remember that you could have a 0 found set and go to related would still work? And now it doesn't work unless you have a record. And so they changed that somewhere in like 15 or 16 or something. And all of a sudden it's like, what's going on?
So you have to test for validity in your scripts before you move to the related records. Is the only way.
What was that again? Test?
You have to test for validity that the related, if there is a set of related records.
Yeah, true.
Script.
Yeah, right.
But
Before
if
you attempt to go there.
But if you wanted to go there anyway, then now you need a second way to get there.
What still irks me about the go to related record with the whole found set is that if you summon that from a record that doesn't have a match in the related table, the step errors out, even though it gets you at the destination.
Mm-hmm.
With context independent cards, go to related record doesn't work in that case. You got to do the perform find in order to pull that one off.
A perform find is also context dependent. In both cases, you need to be in a layout where you expect it to work.
I can pass something to it and then I can pass the primary key to it and do a foreign key search in that field if it's in a different context. Go to related record, it has to be a related TO.
Is there a performance difference?
That's a good question.
Don't know.
When you do a go to related record, the dialogue you get is performing find, right? Isn't like it's I think that's what it is.
It's using the join to pull the records up through its index.
Okay.
Yeah, I've the testing that I've done on it, which has not been exhaustive, but it showed the exact same time to do a find versus a go to related record. They are both doing, I think, the same action behind the scenes.
Yeah, in fact, even when you're waiting, it even says finding, and it uses the same dialogue too.
Yeah. Obviously, that one where you're doing I don't know, what would you call it, an outer join? The one that finds all the related records, the go to related option to say for all this whole set. Obviously, that's a much slower one because it's doing a more complex join. But that would probably be much more difficult to do the other way by looping through your found set, grabbing all the keys, and doing some other way to do that.
By the way, Matt, you have a refresh button there that you can use upper right.
You've added a refresh button for me. Real-time development by Eric Matthews.
I have one thing to add about go to related, and that's if you are going to related from a portal, but you want to commit the parent record before you go to related, you have a problem there, and you kind of have to use the find method. You click the portal row, grab that one ID, then you can commit and then do your find. Whereas if you commit, then you can't go to that related portal row because commit throws you out of the portal.
It's
I don't know
true.
if that made sense.
That's true. It does.
Yeah, it's very true.
Can you use go to related record and an omit? Is there a way to make that play?
Kirk, on that same subject, I would say that finds, I mean, maybe this is outside of the scope of the question, but finds allow you to search on any number of criteria, not just key values. And
right.
The temptation with go to related record is to have multi-predicate joins, with things on both sides that are
which are straight up evil.
Context, and it builds a bunch of heavier schema that you don't need if you use a find.
That's I would file that one under my largest argument for perform find versus any other method to getting data, is because you have so much power in the script steps. Go to layout, enter find mode, set field, perform find. Especially if you have emit, so you can have like a And those perform extremely well until you get to around 10 requests, and then they start to slow down the more requests you have. So if people are not already in the database, we've got some new people who join, and we're halfway in now. This is the Duel database. This is all being live streamed to YouTube right now, courtesy of Matt Petrowski.
I think
this whole thing is actually just an episode of FileMaker Talk. Actually, it's not, but it should be. We could post it.
Did we sign a disclosure for that?
Hey, Vince is there.
Wow. A year off and then like 2 in 1 week. Wow.
I know. It's kind of embarrassing, but we like talking to each other. So I don't know. So I'm going to go ahead and vote on this one, and everyone can watch my vote. Oh, here we go. Perform find for the win. So yeah, click on your side, make your case. 25-6. Boy, that wasn't even close.
I'm with you there, Matt, with the schema independence. Yeah.
Right.
Schema independence, yes. So global variables to global fields was fairly close, 23-18. That was an interesting result.
It's another it depends subject, though. It just totally depends.
None of these depend. They're all completely black and white, like everything in life.
That's how you're deciding. That's how you have to decide things these days.
Or blue and green in this case, I think. Okay, next topic, plugins versus native FileMaker. Who wants to take the case that plugins are superior? And who wants to take the winning side?
Plugins already win. FileMaker doesn't exist without plugins.
That's kind of true.
We need monkey bread here.
Try to hook up anything to the serial port without a plugin. I challenge you.
True. When's the last time anyone needed to connect something to the serial port? I guess.
Or any port, USB. What do you want to connect?
Yeah, I guess that's true. So Matt Petrowski is arguing in favor of plugins.
When was the last time they built a computer with a serial port?
Yeah, but I think the argument is which one by default if you have a choice.
I mean, I'm all for native, but I really don't want to go up against Matt Petrowski.
You're standing on the higher hill on this one, though. I mean, if you're going to debate Matt Petrowski on a topic, this will be a good one. So, Robert, you're in charge of it, and we'll all help you.
Plugins are always a last resort for me. That's the way I approach it. I have no choice.
Plugins are last resort?
Yeah.
That's kind of a good way to put it. Like because they absolutely do things you can't do in FileMaker. Matt, what's your case for plugins other than the completely useless serial port example?
Oh, do you ever feel the need to use Python, Java, any other external language?
No, no, and no.
Do you ever find that there is a massive amount of power in the operating system itself with all of its tools?
Gonna have to go yes on that one.
Because I mean, there's just so many things that you can do as long as you can get outside of FileMaker.
Yeah, in Java, we need like Jesse Barnum on that one too.
Ever want to run JavaScript server side?
Mm-hmm.
Anything.
What plugins do you rely on, Matt?
Me, the two that I use, I have Monkey Bread installed and Base Elements. Those are always installed, no matter what. And then every once in a while, I'll have the 360 Script Master. With those three, there's really nothing I can't do. But I mean, anything that lets you get outside, Base Elements will let me get outside to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I do run the beeswax. I run who's that Porter, Vince? That
I mean Simon? You mean
yeah,
Simon?
yeah,
Bebox.
Simon made it. Yeah, it's really advantageous for running Python stuff because he just hooked right into the OS if you need to run Python. But
I mean,
That's the Mac one, right?
yeah, it's only Mac.
I can't turn my video on, but I would like to make, this is Jonathan Fletcher. I don't know why my video isn't starting, but I would like to make the case for Scribe because I do a lot of manipulating in Word and Excel documents lately, and Scribe works really nice that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea that came up of like pitting specific plugins against each other, Base Elements versus MBS. Scribe probably doesn't have any analog.
They're not here to defend themselves.
Pardon, Eric?
They're not here to defend themselves.
That's true too.
True.
But we can organize. If you guys like this topic, this idea of doing the shootout or whatever, the duel, we can do this again. Eric and I went to such trouble making this sweet database. We should put it to use. I mean, like an hour or maybe two.
Yeah, the monkey bread features in Script Workspace make it almost indispensable.
Yeah, that's kind of true too, right? So it's not just like what features they can give to your clients in the application, but what do they give to you as a developer to make the development environment better? And that's pretty huge.
I love having the check syntax and execute calc in the calc dialog now. That's such a big improvement.
And which plugin are you referring to for that one? Because that was the Draco guys had a separate plugin for that a long time.
Monkey Bread does that.
Monkey is doing evaluation in the calc dialog now.
Yep.
Nice.
You need the latest plugin, Matt.
I do. I've asked Christian and I haven't licensed his latest ones. I just sort of always end up going through Base Elements, just calling execute system. But yeah, it is super convenient. I mean, gosh, he's prolific. He's got so much in there. He just keeps, oh yeah, I do this, I do this, I do this.
If he was on this call, he'd like, oh, you want that? Hold on, give me 5 minutes, you know? And he would come right back and do it. So something that hasn't been brought up, and I apologize for the noise, it's a little bit noisy here. Something that hasn't been brought up is the topic of, installation and support. Like if you have a lot of users and they need to get it installed on each user's machine versus maybe just having it run as a PSOS process.
Server side, yeah, server side.
Yeah, so that way you don't have to encumber users with the fact that like, oh, they need to get it installed. It just runs on a server and you've got it installed there just once. So if I had to use plugins, that would be the best way I would want to use it. I don't want to have the headache of, everybody having to have it installed locally.
Yeah, I mean, the data, it makes sense. Data's already on the server. Use it on the server.
Yeah, I really like plugins like the Dracoventions or the Monkey Bread for the developer tools, but I'll avoid at all costs adding something that adds a requirement to the file or dependency.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I think the one irony that I would bring up, and Christian is not here, but the irony is that Christian and both Heather Winkle were on the LFM disk meeting, I think what was it, a month ago or 2 months ago? And the irony is like, yeah, Christian is saying, sure, I got like, larger font sizes and I can do all these things, and everything he adds kind of goes against the normal UI conventions that you would normally expect. So everything is like slapped together. I don't blame him. He's working fast. He's getting us features, but from a design perspective, it's like zero. Like, the line numbers don't match. Like if you change the font size, the line numbers don't match. The search box at the top is just placed there. It has no alignment, whatever. It's just there, so from a design perspective, he's definitely.
But adding find to almost every dialogue stuff for everything from value lists to scripts is just super.
Kind of like the early days of Craigslist, all features and no interface.
Yeah, it's all function, no fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well put. Much better than. Good. Heidi, we just hit 70 people on this call. It's pretty great. So, Robert, you're supposed to be in charge of rebutting on this one. And I think Matt's going to completely be going down in flames on plugins.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. Any other points?
I think people have pretty much said it. I mean, there's deployment to handle. There's the fact that you need to account that it's not available on FileMaker Go unless you go through some extensive steps. And for WebDirect, well, you can't have it. You can only rely on stuff that's going to be server side. I'm not sure what else I would say, but like portability and things like that. If you have one more dependency in there, it's something that is not nice to have. I mean, if you're looking at the code, not having the plugin installed, like you get those like missing function or missing calls and all that stuff, and trying to then figure what was the required plugin for this to then light up, can be a bit of a struggle. So a couple things that make it so if you can stick to native, then I would say sticks to native.
Yep, kind of like Mike's point. If it's the last resort, do it. All right, I think we have enough. Let's vote and go to the next topic. (34-6). Good job, Matt.
As long as I can keep using them.
Did anybody even bring up the cost of plugins? I guess they're fairly inexpensive. All right, the next one is perform find versus execute SQL. And I love that there's two execute SQL commands. I'm talking about the calculation function, not the script step. So mainly this is a scripting thing, again, kind of to get data, not necessarily a found set, but to work with your database while you're scripting. It's kind of the idea behind this one. And before we even talked about it, it's already 7-0. Who wants to take the case of execute SQL?
I can speak up in favor of it for certain uses.
Sweet. Alan? Who wants the perform find side? Kim?
Clearly, if no one wants it, I'm certainly not the best person to try to help encourage the for vote.
I bet you could still win against execute SQL. This is another one, I think a little bit like the previous one. Well, I have my prediction of which is going to win. But, I think all of us, if we've been doing this for a long time, have our favorite ways of doing it. And one of the things I was really kind of hoping with this discussion is that we could be opened up to some new ideas about these things that we hadn't considered because we haven't been using these features. So who wants perform find? No one? Bueller?
Just people can just start talking about, like, I mean, it's not going to be slower. It's almost always faster. It's native. You don't have to go out and do any code. It's low code, right?
You just volunteered. You're now the person on the job.
Alan,
I want you to make the execute SQL case first, though, please.
Well, I'll throw out just a few things that I like it for. As you can all imagine, I don't use it all the time for everything, but so if you want to get the index of a field as data, not as a list in a window, in a dialog, you can use execute SQL to do that. And I use that fairly frequently, or at least of the uses that I have for it, that is a frequent one. The FileMaker tables and FileMaker fields databases that are kind of internal repositories of information for FileMaker, I make great use of in certain contexts to be able to quickly pull a list of all the tables in a file or all the fields in a table and all the metadata about those fields. So those are things that you might not know about. Beverly Votes execute SQL missing manual. If you haven't seen it, describes how you can use those, some of the ways you can use those, and that's a great resource for execute SQL. And then the last thing I would say is that it lets you get at data from one context without creating a join in the relationship graph. And sometimes you don't want to create another join just for one purpose, another table occurrence or another relationship. And execute SQL works just fine and keeps your graph leaner and lighter and more legible. And that's it.
Any developers on this call use execute SQL all day, every day? I know there are developers like that. John, you're a big fan.
Yeah.
Hands up. Tom, like it? Carlos, I saw them go up.
I do.
Not a ton.
I use it a lot because you can, this is Jonathan, I'm sorry, I don't know why my camera's not working. You can use, you can find stuff that's unrelated, like just one-offs. I wouldn't use it in a auto enter calc or something, but I mean, but it's nice to be able to not have to touch the schema and just go find that one little piece of data that's related in a particular way, and you're done. You know, and it takes seconds to throw. I've got a macro that does my execute SQL structure, and I just replace a couple of parts of it, and I've got a execute SQL calc. I find it very, very handy.
I use that a lot for calc, for counts of particular statuses. Makes it very convenient.
I use it to build JSON.
I'm curious, we were talking about this exact same thing, if it wouldn't be better to use the data API versus the execute SQL for that very reason. One is it's not being performed. It's not dependent on the FileMaker script engine in order to get your result. And now that they've got the native function in FileMaker, so you don't have to take care of all the extra legwork to make a data API request.
So yeah, that's a third variable in here. That's a great idea. Solves the same problem that execute SQL solves, but in a maybe better way, I think.
Yeah, and it automatically responds with a JSON object, right? So
that's true too, which is I work with JSON so much more these days.
Well, it's so new, nobody thought of it.
Suggestion.
What was that, Vince?
Sorry, Ed Pike had a great suggestion. The winner of this gets to duel it out with execute data API.
That's a good idea.
Maybe tomorrow.
I'll use execute SQL to render calculation results in a local variable placed on a card window
SAS
inside
team meeting.
Sorry. I'm using execute SQL in card windows displayed using the hide function and the local variable for pop-up so that I don't have to render any calculations anywhere. And it all works really fast. That said, I've got one strong argument against this, if I can give that, in that if you have multiple windows open and a record that's not committed, you can, unless there's been a remedy employed that I don't know about, you can bring down your whole instance. It used to be you would bring people down on the network, but FileMaker 19 seems to have fixed that. You have to be very careful that all the records are committed on all the windows on your workstation.
Yep. Commit record is a step I use before any call to execute.
Of course, right? But if you got two windows open and you don't know that the other one's got a locked record, you got a problem.
Yeah.
It happens when you've got hundreds of users on a system.
Do we have enough info on this one to vote, or is there more points people want to make?
One other comment I would make is I wish we had a slider instead of a voting left side or right side, because, you know, party affiliations are always a little bit suspect. But what I'm saying is, you know, it's because I like to use SQL, and I think it's fine to use execute SQL often, but I totally for sure avoid it like the plague for anything aggregated related. Because when you have a lot of data, that's just you're asking for trouble. So anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Making this, I made it totally binary for the voting, just pick one or the other, but it would have been nice to say, yeah, I like this one 7 out of 10. That would have been a more.
How comfortable do you feel using this feature?
Yeah, exactly.
Very comfortable. Oh, it's very itchy.
I love that. Adding a comment so people could comment on why they picked.
We can use this feature again after having been bitten once.
But
hey, let's vote on the slider.
We probably have. Eric, why don't you and I do that for tomorrow?
Oh boy.
It doesn't have to be like a JavaScript widget. We can just make like some simple thing.
Yeah, I think it's make these people squirm. Make a choice.
JavaScript progress bar.
Yeah, JavaScript, man. Hey, Eric, are you still my friend?
Or a board account.
Where?
FFM has a pretty easy slider JavaScript to drop in through an add-in.
That's true. All right, let's vote on this one. And we're going to do one quick one because right at 11, we're going to go to transactions versus the easy way. And Vince Bonanno is going to take on transactions, and I'm not sure who's going to go the other side. But let's talk about get UUID versus get UUID number. I love this one because when we brought it up, there was already discussion that was pretty heated, like between me, Eric, and Vince on it, which was pretty fun. Who wants to take get UUID number, the function that came with what, 18, 17?
Is Matt Petrowski, is he willing to do it?
I'm a UUID guy.
Here's from someone new who hasn't picked one.
All right, real quick, but I have to leave at 11 o'clock too.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pick number.
All right, sweet.
And I'll just go ahead and start. I might not hear the counter argument. Well, numbers for some reason aren't smaller. It has to do with how they're storing the numbers. But until you start indexing, then actually the even if you do minimal indexing on the text, it actually takes up more space. I'm kind of hoping that someday maybe they could make it an option so you don't have to store the text version of the number, so that it would make that faster and even more efficient. But yeah, I mean, Jeremy Bonte made a really strong argument for numbers for you know, over in with Matt Petrowski, I think, over at FileMaker Standards, and he did a bunch of testing. But you know, in the testing I've done recently, the differences aren't really that big. But anyway, I just still side with numbers with the hope that it'll actually the performance on those will actually improve. Where I don't think that the performance on text could actually ever improve. So that's that.
So get UUID. Who's got that side? Text. Text UUID index can be massive. Eric, I'm not actually entirely sure that the index of a text UUID is smaller than a number UUID. I thought not only was the data using more space in the file, but the
No, the
index was
number's
using
smaller.
more space in the
Number's
file.
smaller.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
You've
Oh yeah,
tested it?
yes. I'll have to post the maybe over on the group. Are we doing this one again tomorrow?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So this one I can post a couple sample files. I did about
Okay.
50,000 records. So.
We had a blog article on it at AppWorks when this feature came out a few years ago.
Yes.
And we did a bunch of testing on it, and we couldn't find any reason to use the get UID number feature.
Yeah, he didn't do the indexing on it though.
Well, I thought we did, but maybe we missed it, or it's also possible that they changed it in a subsequent version of FileMaker. Like when it came out, it was larger and now it's smaller, something like that. I don't think file size matters that much. I think it's generally not a big deal if you have a database that's very large. Speed of it would be a pretty big winner. So if you had a large database with millions of records and a UUID number was materially faster in doing a join, that would be a reason that might sway me. But I don't think that's the case. And I don't know if anyone has testing on that either. Maybe we can't really vote on this one unless we have nerds who are more nerdly than all of us on this call.
Yeah, I do believe that if you're doing any kind of SQL calls and working with text-based UUIDs versus just numbers, you're going to see a big difference in performance.
So SQL calls will be much faster with get UUID number?
Yes. Though I've only compared it against traditional serial numbers versus UUIDs, but I would suspect you'd get the same thing.
Michael Leishman posted in chat that number doesn't work with Excel because the width of the number field is so wide that it exceeds what Excel can handle as a number. That's a pretty good point, whereas text, it can handle that.
My counter argument is Excel sucks. So.
Yeah, well, what are you going to use? Apple numbers?
Okay, you know what? Actually, I posted this to
Google
Hansa.
Sheets?
I posted this to Hansa. I forget how you pronounce his last name. He says the main benefit of UUID number is that it can be indexed as a number. Say text index is minimal, takes 2 bytes per character. Numeric index takes 4 bytes per digit. So that's the difference on the index.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah, but yeah, where you lose is it when the number is getting stored, it also has to store the text version of it, because you can actually bold a little piece of the number if you wanted to, and it will store all that information.
Right. It doesn't index it, but it does store it, I thought.
Yeah. So I'm looking for an option not to store text, but let's see.
Let's vote on this one and then get to we're going to skip the theme one. You can vote on it if you want to. And we're going to, after we vote on this one, UUID versus UUID number, we're going to go to transactions. I have cast my vote.
Matt.
Yes.
You're going to do transactions now, right?
We're going to do transactions now, yes.
Right.
This meeting will end in 15 minutes. So this one runs 1 hour and 15 minutes. Tomorrow's will run longer. Tomorrow we're going to start at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. And the first half hour is just kind of a get to know. And then right at half an hour in, we're going to start the duel. And the duel will go longer. It'll go 1 hour and a half rather than 1 hour and 15. That's because today we basically took over the Portland type format for the meeting. And tomorrow we're taking on the FMDig, and we're sticking with our formats. Also tomorrow we're not going to be using Zoom. We're going to be using GoToMeeting. And that's all on the meetup. It should be on all the meetups that you're posted where you saw this. If anybody wants even more of this.
Whose idea was this? It's awesome.
I think I'll take credit.
Yep.
I had the idea and then we fleshed it out. We had an initial call with me and Eric and Vince Bonanno, and the three of us just completely improved it and came up with a whole bunch of other things. And then Matt Petrowski ruined a bunch of other parts when he and I talked. I'm just kidding. I'm just heaping the abuse on you, Matt. It's just like I said, this is just like a regular podcast. We just.
I do have to leave though. I've got to go pick up my daughter.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, Matt. Okay. Transactions versus the easy way. Everyone cast their vote on UUID, which looks like it's a hands down winner. 31-5. Vince Bonanno is arguing on the benefit of transactions. And what he's talking about is the transaction model that you've been talking about for quite a long time in the community. and been speaking on at meetups recently, versus the easy way, which is basically just set field. Like if you're setting a bunch of data, you would have a script that just sets it and doesn't necessarily test and doesn't commit it all at once in one transaction, such that if the user gets disconnected in the middle of creating or setting a bunch of data, you'd have a half-built record, half-built set of records. So who wants to take the easy way? Who wants to debate Vince Monano? Come on, someone has to be bold. Or I'll pick a name. Dean, I'm going to make you do it. What do you think?
Well, I'm not an expert in either, so I'm here to learn. But I'll.
You can marshal the topic. Are you a transaction fan? Do you use them in your work?
Not too much. Most of mine is pretty static data. We're storing records
all right.
on.
You take the lead, and we'll all help you. Vince, go ahead and make your case.
Okay. So over the years, we've been building systems where users have to access data remotely, and with COVID in the last year, it's been multiplied dramatically. Everybody's like working from home, but we found that over the years, systems, as they got more data in them, just got slower and slower. And to some teams, it just got to a point where, like, if you can't solve this performance issue, basically we're out of here. We're going to figure it out in another platform. And so we ended up going down the road, and I talked about this also presenting at the FM Disc this Friday, part 2 of my transactions talk, and then hopefully we'll talk about it next month at Big FM. But the point is that there are tools that you can now use to measure, and you can measure the performance, both native and transactional. But there's a lot of benefits to doing things transactional. One of the main benefits to strive for is the fact that you can store the data of calculations so that you have stored values rather than unstored calculations. And that's the main killer, basically. When you're looking at data and you're looking at a list, like for example, you look at a project list and you've got unstored calcs from, maybe just even something simple, just like tasks for a project. How many tasks are completed versus uncompleted, right? So what it has to do, it has to communicate back and forth to the server to get all the results of all those records. So it's got to pull all those related records down to get the result of each project row. So it's really a lot of traffic. And so basically storing the data, then you're just pulling a raw list of data and numbers. So things just hum, just very, very performant. I won't get into the nitty gritty details of the complexity of achieving, integrity of data. There's a lot to consider. It's not trivial. So a lot of us, know the rules, and basically, if you know the rules and you know how to break them, transactions are for you. I'll stop.
How hard would you say they are to implement if you're not super familiar with it? Is there like a starting kit that you can use to make it easier?
Yeah, there's 2 levels basically. It's like, I think about it in terms of sync. One-way sync is like really easy, and then bidirectional sync is like off the charts. It's really hard, So transactions, if you just want to store data, but you're not concerned about data transactional integrity of calculations upstream or whatever, then just doing transactions basically is really easy. It's really easy. Just follow the examples that Todd Geist has on he's talked about it for many years, and you just follow those steps, and you build. You basically open a record. You can loop through the records in the portal, or there's other techniques also that have evolved. So doing that is really easy. But doing the other part, where you get the benefits from doing stored values, that's really hard and a lot of considerations.
So the larger and the more important the database, the bigger the benefit for this method. You think that's a fair statement?
Yes and no, I guess. I guess it depends also the connectivity, because there's a big difference between LAN and WAN, and so there's a significant difference that you will see.
In performance. So in other words, it's much faster to use transactions on a WAN.
Yeah. However, if you use transactions, it's kind of a combination of things. Transactions kind of have to work. Like if you really want to take the benefit of doing transactions, you really have to like package up your blob of what you want done, send it to the server, PSOS, transact it on the server, and then you've got it the fastest possible. If you do it local, you're still on a WAN, you're still communicating back and forth for all those things. And FileMaker doesn't have built-in transaction support, so you're still doing that whole blob of data, and then you're committing it, and then there's this network traffic that has to happen, and that's not efficient. So doing it on the server is the best.
Vince, can you say a little more
about the amount of data that is stored and that is involved in not only doing the you got to have the data ultimately after it's transacted, but you also got to store those transactions and manage that too. Does that become an issue?
Yeah, so in the approaches that we take, we actually create a transaction record. That's our controller. And the transaction record then has, in the past we used different keys for different tables, but we found that we could just use one key, and then that key is a pointer to whatever data in whatever table that you're talking to. So the transaction table is very, very tiny. It has a key, like an internal ID, and then it has like the timestamp, who did it, how long it took, and the payload that went in for that transaction. And we send like a JSON payload, and then it goes into that transaction record. And then if anything goes wrong with that transaction, we can inspect the JSON payload and see what went wrong with the payload. And normally when the transaction is successful, we just wipe out the payload, because we don't want to store a big blob of text if we don't need to. So, a lot of little factors being considered. Alan, you had a question?
Well, I was just wondering if you can illuminate a little in more detail how transactions improve performance. I can see how, for example, PSOS is improving performance, and I can see how flattening your data by storing things that might otherwise be unstored calcs, how that's better performance. But where do transactions come into play in achieving those things? Because I can flatten data without transactions, and I can do PSOS for, let's say, creating records in bulk or whatever, without a transaction approach.
Can we get a definition of transactions? I mean, I look at this and say, what Vince was talking about is a whole lot broader than the stuff I do for transactions. So I'm kind of curious as to what the definition is here.
So basically grouping all kinds of data edits and creations and deletes under one atomic commit. So that you can do that simply if you create. You can explore this by just creating a transaction table, and then having a key, and then putting in an ID to whatever relationship you define in the graph to any record in any table, and then through that relationship modifying data on the related record. And as long as you don't commit that transaction record, everything you do, including deletes, can be rolled back. So you can delete a bunch of records, you can put in another key, update some data in this record, put in another key, update some data in another record. All that is stored in memory, and then when you're done, if you commit that one transaction record, all those changes get committed.
Okay, the stuff.
At once.
And then there's another huge part to that too, Vince, which is that you can do error checking to see if there's an error committing it, and then you can revert the whole thing as a batch. So it makes it impossible to create like an invoice record with line items and fail to create the line items, but successfully create an invoice. That's the key problem solved, if I'm characterizing that correctly.
Yeah, going back to
Yeah.
Alan's question, basically, Alan, if I understood your question, what benefit do you get uh, by having like transactions? Like,
Yeah, my question is, you're talking about performance and making performance improvements using a transaction approach, and I'm wondering whether there's something about using transactions to create, delete, edit that is itself faster performance-wise once you set up all the supporting infrastructure, or whether you're saying you use transactions and PSOS and denormalizing data to get better performance. What is transactions role? What is the transactional approach? What is the role of that in improving performance?
so
that
so
alone.
Right. So to do the transactions, that's like the beginning piece, right? So if you can do them, mechanics of it is easy. Anybody can do it. It's pretty easy. But then the data integrity of moving from unstored calcs to stored calcs, that's a whole other level of challenge. And so, for example, that list view example. So if you can do it on the server and it transacts really quickly and you get the stored value, when your user looks at a list view of projects, so the benefit that the user gets is that when they pull down that list of projects, FileMaker knows that that's a stored value. It doesn't have this extra, communication to say to the server, hey, I need these related records to calculate this unstored value.
Yeah.
And it's amplified or multiplied by every single row that you're showing. So there's this back and forth communication that you'll see. And if you look, there's a new feature called release debug that you can turn on some flags and it outputs a log. And I go into this in my talk, in my last talk as well. But there used to be a way that you used to use a network monitor, it was Mac only, but now there's this flag that you can turn on, and you can check, just build a file with unstored calcs and build another file with just the stored value, and then just run the tests and see the number of calls and the amount of traffic that you get. You'll see that it's dramatically different.
Vince, I have a quick question for you because I know time is running short here. I totally understand the benefits of using a transactional model, but I was sort of curious if you can address the developer overhead time implementing a transactional model versus the easy way system.
Mike, that totally hits it.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm someplace in the middle on this. I mean, I created a window with a single record edit, and don't allow anybody to leave that record or leave that screen except through a script. There's no commit. So you click outside a field, no commit happens. Commit only happens when you explicitly click a button to close it in the script. There's your commit of that record. There's the batch entry data.
Yeah, but it's still possible for another user to open up that same record.
Agreed.
And commit the record and make a change in the middle of the time when you're doing it. So what you need to do is actually open up that record and lock it so that no other user can make an edit. And that, which means now you've got a record sitting there unlocked for potentially an hour while that person's out to lunch. So that's kind of the downside with that one. So I think what Vince, you're making kind of a bigger point. I think, Vince, one of them is transactions and the other one is kind of go back to what I like to describe as the way databases were built in mainframe times when an unstored calculation would completely kill the performance because they didn't have the CPU. But FileMaker and all other databases are incredibly fast at displaying stored data. And if you can build your database so that for example, in the invoice table, you have a field called invoice total. And in the customer table, you have a field called total of all invoices for all customers. And rather than those be unstored calculations of all the line items of all the invoices for that customer, it's just a stored value. So when you look at a list of your customers, you can see their total invoice value absolutely instantaneously. And every time you edit any invoice, add a line item, modify a line item, create an invoice, you also update that stored value so that it's 100% correct. Again, I'm not entirely sure that's your point, Vince, but that's some religion I got a long time ago as a huge benefit for performance by doing it that way.
And something I'd like to say towards what Mike was bringing up in terms of the developer overhead, I think when you're starting out a project, it's gonna take longer, okay? But you catch up because the things that you build with transactions are so modular, so reusable, that you end up having like this set of Lego blocks that you just can then pile together, and then you have something new altogether. And whereas if you do things in the I don't know what's the opposing side name, the easy way. The easy way is easy at first, but it becomes a maintenance nightmare in the long run. Whereas you're updating something that you're doing in this context, and then it's very difficult because the logic of your components are pretty much tied to wherever your easy way is implemented, instead of being embedded in the transaction handler itself.
And I totally understand that the easy way is what I would call native FileMaker. And while you can do all the transactional business natively in FileMaker, it is swimming upstream a little bit for, I think, a newer developer. It is kind of foreign territory.
Yeah, I'll give you that. We're at a little over time, so I'm going to call for a vote. If anybody wants to stick around for another few minutes to nerd out or decompress or whatever, we'll keep the meeting running. So please cast your vote. Transactions versus the easy way, which really should be a slider because there's no way that I could vote 100% on one way or the other on this one.
Well, and there was also no clear definition of what each one of them meant.
This is true. That was supposed to be part of it.
That's our mistake a little bit.
Yeah.
Hard to, we should do that better.
Well, the easy way to me could be just, oh, well, let's stop developing and go take a nap. That's
Sure,
my
that
easy
can work.
way.
I think the easy way is what you're doing now, and transactions is what Vince is doing.
I mean, the easy way is like what Mike was referring to and Robert said, which is, as a developer, there's this overhead of learning how to do something in addition to what FileMaker does naturally, right? But the problem is FileMaker doesn't do it in a way that gives you the benefit of performance. You have to do this extra effort to get that performance. And if you guys, or for anybody, they have systems that are, not on a WAN, and you have everybody on a local area network. I mean, this stuff is, you don't need to do this. FileMaker is super fast on a LAN. It's when you get on a WAN where you start to really see these problems.
Vince, I'm working on changing a process over to transaction, and I hadn't really thought about the PSOS until you brought it up just now. With hundreds of users, do you find that the server can get overwhelmed if you're using PSOS all the time for things?
So when PSOS first came out, what we found was we logged all the PSOS calls because we were concerned that they would stack up and then you get diminishing value from that. So it's really important to understand how fast each of these calls will be. And so when we monitor it, we're always checking to see, like, is this under a second? Is this under a half a second or whatever? And so, yeah, you have to be careful. You have to definitely be careful. If you have like 300 users putting in, edits over PSOS, and they're all trying to get in their deadline, and it's at 3 p.m., you could have problems. So yeah, a lot of considerations for sure.
I want to hear John Howell. Go ahead, speak up.
And so I wanted to ask you, how do you manage when perform script on server might cause the script engine to fail? How do you ensure that that's not going to be an issue? If you're dependent
so,
on,
you get a result. You're getting a result back from PSOS. I mean, there's different ways you could do it. You can do PSOS wait, PSOS don't wait. There's some things we were exploring to be asynchronous in terms of, like, I throw it over my shoulder and I don't wait for it, but somehow I can get notified that my transaction failed. And there would be some way, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. That's kind of like our thinking. But right now what we do is we wait. And because they happen so quickly, then you would know that, hey, basically something went wrong, something failed. But recently, you know, in production systems that we have, this is what we do. And we've had no issues with, you know, server PSOS kind of crapping out.
We're using we have an environment with over 330 users, and it's really intense, but with really good resources. The servers are on systems that are many times faster than Amazon. It's incredible. But I've been told basically to not use perform script on server for anything except logging, because it has notoriously taken down the script engines, and we've not yet gotten as far as implementing Zabbix in order to restart those script engines. So instead, what we're doing is we're running multiple script schedules that run in loops, multiples, and they check each other. So even if one finishes or stops, there's another script schedule going that it would handle the same process of processing things, but something has to be uploaded for that to happen. So ongoing dynamic. But we're trying to avoid perform script on server and still incorporate, in some cases, transactional work, if that makes sense.
Actually, we stopped using PSOS for logging because we do a lot of logging.
Right.
And it's that same issue where it seemed like it was, if you look at the server log, I'm talking about the logging we do in a FileMaker file. But then if you look at the server's logs, you'll see how for every PSOS call, it has to open a connection, open the file, close the connection. So it seemed like there's a lot going on there for every PSOS call.
So we're doing the same thing. We're logging from FileMaker. So Vince, my question would be, can you move that whole transaction dynamic out of perform script on server entirely and do it based on script schedules?
Yeah, you could do that, but then you're talking more like something along the lines of eventual integrity, or how would you compare it? Like, so like I made this transaction and I submitted it, and it will eventually get acted on, but I have to wait for the schedule to pick it up and act on it. But then again, like, you know, it's a difficult one to address, because maybe the insights I had on the data that I looked at the time to make my decisions have now changed. So I would have put in some different data when that transaction would have effectively been run, right? So like I'm looking at some, like, I don't know, some metrics of some data that's there in the system. I put in my record, I submit it, but it gets only acted on like a minute later. But had I looked at the data a minute later, I would have been putting in different data. So
you're considering the difference between real-time and near real-time data. Is that
yeah, real time versus like it's okay if the data can be done later. So
that's why we have multiple script schedules that they're almost identical running. So we're never really waiting more than about 30 seconds for some tremendously complex process to happen. And I'm talking about 8,000 script lines that have to run when it happens. It's very complex, but no one's waiting at all because they're constantly, it's a random amount of time, but because multiple script schedules are running, it's never a minute.
You have to remember that the scripting engine is threaded, but the database engine is not. So like any data is going to get in line. Scripts can run asynchronous, but data gets in line. There's only one conduit for data. So like the database engine can't, like, you know, so that's an important point to consider.
That's good. Thank you.
Super painful one too.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
Good answer. Thank you.
We're like 10 minutes over at this point. I'll go ahead and say we'll officially close the meeting. Thanks everyone so much for coming. Everyone, please vote on that. By the way, at the moment, a minute ago when I checked, it was tied 18-18 for transactions versus EasyWay, which is crazy. That's our only tie. I will confess that I changed my vote to make it a tie because I really wanted it to be a tie. But also, I was really swayed. I was actually on the board of doing it the easy way, but Vince, I believe you've convinced me. Also, I think you helped me understand that I'm already doing a lot of this anyway, because I didn't really ever file using stored values as opposed to unstored calculations as part of this, but it really is part of this.
Just broke your tie for Vince's behalf.
So Vince for the win. So thanks everyone very much. I won't end the meeting right now, but I will.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll be ending at a hard stop in 3 minutes at 11:30 my time.
May I ask one more question? Would this be a good time to? This is Jonathan. My camera's not working today. Would this be a good time to discuss the possibility of using the data API instead of PSOS?
That could be a good one for tomorrow. I think I have a topic on that one.
Okay.
Data API versus PSOS, huh?
We should do what Ed was saying. So we should do the data API versus PSOS, and then whoever the winner is, we should put like OData against those winners, something like that.
And Matt, I just want to recall you. I don't know if you saw, but I think before Eric left, he said, let's make sure that we save the chat.
Yes, I will do that. I'll just do that now.
Well, who's ever hosting it, the chat automatically gets saved.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm still going to do it just in case.
Just go find it in the folder.
Right, yeah.
See y'all tomorrow.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, for the diehards who are going to come to both meetings, we're going to have very little. We're only going to have 2 topics repeated tomorrow, but all the other ones will be new. I think we've created around 23, 24 so far, total topics.
Take care.
All right, thanks everyone for coming. This has been really fun, I love that I actually changed my mind on something too. I hope you guys did as well.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks
Matt.
Hey, merci
See you
beaucoup.
later.
All right.
Good idea.
Bye bye.
Bye.
All right, that's all I got. I'll end this meeting and I'll talk to you guys soon.